Something had shifted in Matthew. Rob Miller couldn't quite put his finger on it, but a father always knows. His 7-year-old autistic son, who'd never made eye contact with anyone, was now waiting, as if he were expecting someone. But who could it be? Rob Miller was 38 years old, and he'd built an empire. CEO of Global Tech, a business communication software company valued at $180 million. The irony wasn't lost on him. He sold tools to help the world communicate better, while his own son lived trapped in a silence that no amount of money could break. Matthew was 7 years old. Diagnosis: severe nonverbal autism. Regression at age 2. He'd said 15 words before he turned 2. Mama, dada, water, dog, more. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, silence. 5 years later, not a single word more. The doctors were clear. ABA therapy 5 days a week. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, sensory integration. Rob paid for everything. The best specialists in Los Angeles. Private clinic in Beverly Hills. $20,000 a month, with virtually no results. Matthew avoided eye contact, screamed when he got frustrated, banged his head against the walls. He had a fascination with lights. He could spend hours staring at a reflection on the ceiling. But people? No. People were noise, pain, confusion. Matthew's mother, Valerie, couldn't take it anymore. A year ago, after a particularly violent episode where Matthew injured his forehead and had to go to the emergency room, she packed her bags. She didn't say much. Just, "I can't do this anymore, Rob. I can't look at my son and not recognize him." She left for San Diego, to her sister's house. She called every Sunday, asked how Matthew was doing, cried, hung up. Rob didn't blame her. He wanted to run too, but he was the father. Fathers don't run. So he did what he knew how to do: work, 16 hours a day, meetings, trips, investors, anything to avoid being in that huge, silent house where his son existed in a world he couldn't access. He hired caregivers. 6 in 2 years. They all quit. One lasted 3 weeks, another 2 days. The reason was always the same. "I can't handle him, Mr. Miller. It's too much." One of them was honest. "I'm afraid I'll accidentally hurt him when he has an episode." Then Carol Summers arrived, 42 years old. Experience: residential cleaning. References: impeccable. Interview: brief. Rob explained the situation. "I have a son with special needs. It can be complicated. There are therapists who come 3 times a week. I need someone to keep the house in order and, if possible, to be present when the therapists aren't here." Carol listened without interrupting. She had calm eyes, hard-working hands. In the end, she only asked, "Can I meet him?" Rob hesitated. The previous caregivers had met Matthew and ran, but there was something in Carol's voice, something serene. "He's in his room. He usually doesn't like strangers coming in." They went up the marble staircase. 3-story house in Bel Air. Imported hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture. Everything perfect. Everything cold. Matthew's bedroom door was ajar. Inside, the boy was sitting on the floor, moving a toy car back and forth. He wasn't playing with it, just moving it. Straight line, forward, back, forward, back. He'd been doing that for 2 hours. Carol stopped at the door. She didn't go in, she just watched. Then, without Rob telling her anything, she crouched down, slowly. She sat on the floor in the hallway. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to get the boy's attention. She just stayed there, quiet, present. Matthew looked up for half a second. Then he went back to the car. Carol smiled. Not at Matthew, just smiled. Then she stood up and said to Rob, "I can start on Monday. If you've ever felt like the world was against you, like no matter how hard you tried, nothing changed, then you know how Rob Miller felt that night." But there was something about Carol, something he couldn't name. Was it hope? No. It was simpler than that. It was calm. Carol started working. She arrived at 2 p.m., left at 8 p.m. She cleaned, cooked, did laundry, organized, efficient, silent. Never asked more than necessary, never complained. But Rob started noticing things. Small things. Matthew wasn't screaming as much during the afternoons. Before, between 3 and 5 p.m., was the worst time. Sensory meltdowns, screaming, hitting. The therapists called it the window of dysregulation. Rob called it hell. But now, the afternoons were silent. Rob came home at 9 p.m. after Carol had left. The house was spotless. Dinner was ready in the fridge, with handwritten instructions on paper. Matthew, asleep. Everything in order. But there was something else. On the refrigerator door, held by a magnet, there was a drawing. Rob saw it one Thursday evening. It wasn't Matthew's. Matthew only drew circles, obsessive circles, hundreds of circles on a sheet. But this drawing was different. It was hands making shapes, as if they were talking. Rob took the paper. On the back, in clear handwriting, it said, "Day 1, observed only 2 seconds." What did that mean? He put the paper back where it was. The next morning, there was another drawing. More hands, more shapes. On the back, Day 3, observed 5 seconds. Tried moving fingers. Rob felt something strange in his chest. Confusion, curiosity, and something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That afternoon, Rob did something he never did. He came home early, at 6 p.m. His black Tesla pulled into the garage silently. He went upstairs. The house was quiet. Rob peeked from the top of the stairs. The living room was empty, but he could hear something. A soft, rhythmic sound, like clapping. He walked slowly towards Matthew's room. The door was ajar. From the hallway, he could see a portion of the room. Carol was sitting on the floor. Matthew was sitting in front of her. Not close, maybe 5 feet away, but he was there, looking at her. That was already impossible. Matthew never looked at anyone. Carol was moving her hands, slowly, clear shapes. Her lips were moving, but she was speaking very softly. Rob couldn't hear the words, but he could see the hands, touching her chest, then opening her arms, then pointing at Matthew. Matthew didn't move, but his eyes were following the hands. Rob held his breath. He didn't want to break the moment. Slowly, he backed away. He went downstairs. He went out to the garden. He sat on a stone bench and waited. At 8 p.m., Carol came out. Rob was in his study, pretending to check emails. He heard her footsteps, the front door closing, the sound of the garbage truck passing on the street. Rob went up to Matthew's room. The boy was asleep, but on the nightstand there was something new. A notebook, a school notebook, blue cover, worn at the corners. Rob opened it. Page 1, list of basic signs, water, food, bathroom, some more. Please, help, Mussum, Dad. Page 2, timeline. Day 1, only observed. Day 5, moved hands without intention. Day 12, attempted to imitate. Day 20, made the sign for water unassisted. Rob flipped through the pages. There were drawings, explanations, notes written in cramped handwriting. Today, he was frustrated. We tried 12 times, only managed 2 signs. Tomorrow, we'll try again. Undid. On the last page with writing, it said, Day 47. Today, Matthew looked me in the eyes for 8 seconds. He didn't flinch. He didn't scream. He just looked at me. I think he's understanding me. I think he's trying to talk. He just needs a different language. Rob closed the notebook. His hands were trembling. Carol was teaching his son sign language in secret for almost 2 months, without being asked, without charging extra, without expecting recognition. It didn't make sense. Why would she do that? Rob opened his laptop, searched on Google. Nonverbal autism can learn sign language. The first results were studies, scientific articles. Most said the same thing. Early intervention is key. Before age 3, the chances of communication increase. After age 5, without prior intervention, the probability of acquiring alternative language decreases significantly. Matthew was 7 years old. The doctors had already said that verbal language was unlikely, but no one had mentioned sign language. Why not? Why hadn't any of the specialists Rob had paid, none of the certified therapists, none of the neurologists with doctorates from foreign universities, why hadn't any of them suggested this? And why was a cleaning lady with no medical training, no degrees, no apparent reason, doing what an entire team of professionals hadn't done? Rob slept little that night. At 6 a.m. he was already awake. He showered, got dressed, but he didn't go to the office. He cancelled his meetings, sent a message to his assistant, working from home today. At 2 p.m. he heard the doorbell. Carol was arriving, punctual as always. Rob didn't go downstairs to greet her. He stayed in his study, but he left the door ajar. He could hear everything. Carol came in, her soft footsteps climbing the stairs. The door to Matthew's room opening. Her voice, barely a whisper, "Hi, Matthew, it's me." Normally at that hour, Matthew would be on the living room floor, spinning the wheels of a toy truck, obsessed with the circular motion, but Rob had seen him that morning. Matthew was sitting on the floor of his room, still, looking towards the door, as if he were waiting. That was new. Rob got up, walked silently down the hall, positioned himself where he could see without being seen. The bedroom door was open. Carol was sitting on the floor, Matthew facing her, closer than the last time, maybe 3 feet away. That was progress. Matthew hated proximity. Carol took something out of her bag. They were cards, homemade, thick cardboard cut into rectangles. Each had a drawing of a hand making a shape. Below it, a word written in black marker: water, food, bathroom, more. Carol held up the water card. Then with her other hand she made the gesture, 3 fingers together touching her chin, moving downward. Water. Matthew watched. Carol repeated the gesture, slowly. Then she placed the card on the floor, between herself and Matthew. She waited. Matthew looked at the card, looked at Carol's hands, then raised his right hand, trembling, 3 fingers together. He brought them to his chin, but he couldn't complete the movement. His hand fell. Carol didn't show frustration. She just smiled. "You tried. That's what's important. Let's try again." Rob felt something breaking in his chest. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. It was seeing his son trying to communicate. After 5 years of silence, after thousands of dollars in therapies that didn't work, after seeing the doctors shake their heads, after all that, his son was trying. And it was because of her, because of Carol. A woman who earned $100 a week cleaning houses. A woman who arrived an hour early. A woman who studied sign language on YouTube videos on her phone while riding the bus back to her apartment in East LA. A woman who had decided without being asked that Matthew deserved a voice. If this story is starting to touch something in you, if you're feeling that this is more than just a story, it's because it is. There are people in this world who don't do things for recognition. They do them because someone needs someone to believe. And Carol believed in Matthew when no one else did. Rob backed away silently, went down to the kitchen, poured himself a coffee he didn't drink. He just needed to move, process, understand. His phone vibrated. A message from his CFO. "We need your approval for the contract with Global Tech. $3.5 million. Urgent." Rob looked at the message. Then he looked up towards the second floor, where his son was learning to speak with his hands. And he thought, "I've spent 7 years building a communication empire, and I didn't realize my own son couldn't tell me when he was thirsty." He replied to the message, "Approved." Then he turned off his phone. That afternoon, Rob didn't work. He sat in the living room, pretended to read a book, but he was listening. listening to the silence. And within the silence, small sounds, soft clapping. Carol's voice, always calm, sometimes a sound from Matthew, not words, but not screams either. They were vocalizations, attempts. At 5 p.m., he heard footsteps coming down. Matthew and Carol. They came to the kitchen. Rob peeked from the living room without being seen. Carol opened the refrigerator, took out an apple juice, Matthew's favorite, but she didn't give it to him. She left it on the table. Matthew looked at the juice, then looked at Carol, stood in front of her and raised his hand, made a gesture. It wasn't perfect. His fingers trembled, but it was clear. Fist clenched, moving towards the lips. Then he pointed at the juice. Carol's eyes widened, smiled. "You did it, Matthew. You told me you wanted juice. You said it." Rob had to cover his mouth to keep from making noise. His son had just communicated, intentionally, for the first time in 5 years. It wasn't with words, it was with his hands, but it was communication, real, intentional, human. Carol gave him the juice. Matthew took it, drank. Then he did something Rob had never seen. He looked at Carol, directly in the eyes, for 3 seconds, and smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small, barely a curve in his lips, but it was a smile. For Carol, as if to say, "Thank you." Rob went out to the backyard. He sat on the grass, something he hadn't done since he was a kid, and he cried not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from shame too, because he had paid the best professionals in the country. He had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. He had searched clinics in the United States, and a woman who earned only $800 a week, armed with just a cell phone, internet access, and something he had lost a long time ago, hope. That woman had given his son what all that money couldn't buy, a way to say, "I'm thirsty, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm here." Matthew now had a voice, and it was thanks to Carol. When Carol left that night, Rob was waiting for her at the entrance. She was surprised to see him. "Mr. Miller, I thought you were at work." Rob didn't know where to start. He had 1,000 questions, but only one came out. "Why did you do it?" Carol tilted her head. "I don't understand." "The sign language. Why are you teaching Matthew sign language?" Carol lowered her gaze. For a moment, Rob thought she was upset, that maybe she thought he was accusing her of something. But when she looked up, her eyes were wet. "Because he was talking to me, Mr. Miller. All this time, he was screaming on the inside, and no one was listening." Rob was silent. Carol's words echoed in his head like a persistent sound. He was screaming on the inside, and no one was listening. It was true. Matthew had been screaming, literally, tantrum after tantrum, hitting himself, throwing things, crying inconsolably. But Rob had interpreted all that as symptoms, as behaviors of autism, never as what they really were. Desperate attempts at communication from a child trapped in his own body. "How did you know?" Rob asked. His voice sounded broken. "How did you know he could learn?" Carol smiled sadly. "I had a nephew, Danny. He was 9 years old. Severe autism, nonverbal, like Matthew. He lived with my sister in Sacramento." Rob waited. He felt there was more. "He passed away 8 years ago. Accident. He ran across the street chasing after a dog. The driver didn't see him." "I'm so sorry," said Rob. Carol nodded. "For years, my sister and I tried everything. Therapies, doctors, but nothing worked. Danny got so frustrated, he hurt himself, and we didn't know what to do." Carol wiped away a tear that escaped. "One day, weeks before the accident, I saw a video on Facebook. A mom teaching sign language to her autistic son. The boy was communicating, really communicating. I thought, why didn't anyone tell us this was possible? Did you try to teach Danny?" "I tried." Carol smiled bitterly, but it was too late. "I didn't have enough time. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Rob felt an enormous weight in his chest. So you did this for Matthew? And for Danny. I did it because no child should be trapped in silence when there's a way out. Carol looked directly into Rob's eyes. Danny didn't have that opportunity, but Matthew does, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Rob didn't know what to say. He had spent years looking for answers in the wrong places. Expensive clinics, renowned specialists, international conferences, and the answer had always been in the simplest place, in someone willing to try. In someone who saw his son not as a diagnosis, but as a child with something to say. How long have you been studying sign language? Rob asked. 6 months before starting to work here. Carol took out her cell phone, an old model, scratched screen. There are thousands of free videos on YouTube, a complete course in ASL, American Sign Language. I watched it on the bus, at my house at night, when my son was already asleep. You have a son? Yes, Kevin. He's 14 years old. Carol showed the wallpaper of her cell phone, her with a smiling teenager, high school uniform. He knows I get home late some nights because I'm studying to help Matthew. He helps me with dinner when I'm not around. Rob felt even smaller. Carol was a single mother. She worked cleaning houses. She traveled 2 hours on public transportation every day. And still she found time to study, to learn, to give his son what he, with all his resources, hadn't thought to look for. I want to pay you more, said Rob. What you're doing isn't cleaning work. It's therapy. I don't want more money, Mr. Miller. Carol's voice was firm but kind. I don't do this for money. Then what do you want? There must be something I can do. Carol thought for a moment. Then she said, I want you to learn too. Learn what? Sign language. If Matthew is going to communicate like this, he needs his dad to speak his language too. Rob felt something break inside him. She was right. Of course she was right. What good was it for Matthew to learn to talk with his hands if his own father couldn't understand him? Teach me, said Rob. Please. Carol nodded. We start tomorrow. That night, Rob didn't sleep. He stayed up searching for videos on YouTube. Sign language for beginners. Alphabet in ASL. Basic signs for children with autism. He filled a notebook with clumsy drawings of hands. He practiced in front of the mirror. His fingers were stiff, unaccustomed to this type of movement, but he kept trying. The next day, Carol arrived as usual at 2 p.m., but this time, Rob didn't go to his study. He stayed in the living room, waiting. Carol went up to see Matthew. 15 minutes later, she came down. Rob was sitting on the sofa, the notebook open on his lap. I'm ready, he said. Carol smiled, and so it began. What would you do if you discovered that the solution to your greatest pain was always there, waiting for someone brave enough to try it? Don't lie. Really, would you? During the next 2 weeks, Rob's life changed completely. He cancelled trips. He rescheduled meetings. He delegated responsibilities. For the first time in 7 years, his priority wasn't global tech. It was Matthew. Every afternoon from 2 to 4, Carol taught Rob while Matthew did his activities. They started with the basics. Hello, goodbye, thank you, please, yes, no. Each sign had to be precise. The position of the fingers, the movement, the location in relation to the body. Everything mattered. Rob discovered that learning a new language at 38 years old was frustrating. His hands didn't obey. He got confused. He forgot the signs he had practiced the day before. But Carol was patient, just like with Matthew. Let's do it again. You can do it. Try it one more time. After the lessons, Carol went upstairs with Matthew. Rob watched them from the doorway. Now that he knew the signs, he could understand what they were saying. Not everything, but it was enough. Carol, how are you feeling today, Matthew? Matthew, good. Carol, do you want to play a game? Matthew, yes. They were simple conversations, but they were conversations. Real conversations between two human beings who understood each other. One afternoon, Rob mustered his courage. He went into Matthew's room. Matthew looked at him, not with fear, just curiosity. Rob sat on the floor, far away. He didn't want to invade Matthew's space. He took a deep breath. He raised his hands. "Hello, Matthew." His hands trembled, but the sign was clear. Open hand, waving, a greeting. Matthew looked at him, then looked at Carol. She nodded with a smile. "That's your dad. He's talking to you." Matthew hesitated. Then, slowly, he raised his hand. He made the waving hello sign. Rob felt warm tears streaming down his cheeks. It was the first time in 5 years that his son had responded to him directly. It was the first time they'd had a conversation. "I love you, Matthew," Rob signed slowly. Carol had taught him the signs 2 days earlier, fist over the heart. Then, pointing towards Matthew, Matthew didn't respond immediately, but he didn't look away. He stayed there, processing, understanding. Then something incredible happened. Matthew crawled forward, about a foot. He stopped, looked at his father, and raised his right hand, trembling, uncertain. He placed it on his own heart. "I love you." Carol put a hand over her mouth. Rob couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He could only look at his son, who had just told him he loved him for the first time since he was 2 years old. Rob extended his arms. He didn't expect Matthew to come closer. Children with autism generally avoid physical contact, hugs, caresses, too much sensory stimulation. But Matthew looked at the open arms, looked at Carol. She nodded. "It's okay, if you want to." Matthew crawled the last few inches, reached his father, and let himself be hugged. Rob wrapped him gently, softly. Matthew was stiff at first, but slowly, very slowly, Rob felt his son relax, felt him rest his head on his father's shoulder, felt him allow the contact. It didn't last long, maybe 10 seconds. Then Matthew pulled away, returned to his space. But it had been enough. It had been everything. Carol left the room silently, leaving father and son alone. Rob stayed there, sitting on the floor, watching Matthew play with his blocks. But now, every few minutes, Matthew looked up, looked at his father, and smiled. A week later, Rob had a meeting with his executive team. Quarterly presentation, numbers, projections, strategies, everything went well. Global tech was growing, new contracts, international expansion. But when the meeting ended, the CFO stayed behind. "Rob, I need to talk to you." Rob closed his laptop. "What's up? You've been different these last few weeks. You arrive late. You leave early. You miss meetings." The CFO hesitated. "I just want to know if everything is okay." Rob smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd had in months. "Everything is better than okay, Carlos. I'm learning to speak with my son." The CFO frowned. "But your son doesn't speak." "Exactly. That's why I'm learning his language." I don't think Rob fully understood what that meant. He'd built a communications company. He'd given lectures on the importance of effective communication in business. He'd written articles, given interviews, but he'd never really understood what it meant to communicate. Not until he had to learn a completely new language just to tell his son, "I'm here. I see you. I hear you." That afternoon, Rob got home at 5 p.m. Valerie was in the kitchen making dinner. Matthew was in the living room building a tower with blocks. Rob sat on the floor next to him. Matthew looked at him. Rob signed, "Can I play with you?" Matthew thought about it, then nodded. He took a blue block and gave it to his father. They played for 20 minutes. They didn't talk much, a few signs. Here, more, big, small. But they were together, connected. For the first time in 5 years, Rob felt like he knew his son. When the tower fell, Matthew didn't scream. He didn't hit himself. He just looked at the fallen blocks and then looked at his father. He signed, "Again." Rob smiled. Again. They rebuilt the tower together. That night after Carol left, Rob put Matthew to bed. Same routine, pajamas, teeth, bed. But before turning off the light, Rob sat on the edge of the bed. He signed, "Good night, Matthew. I love you." Matthew looked at him, then raised his hand. "Good night, Dad." It was the first time Matthew had used the sign for Dad. Carol had taught it to him weeks ago, but Matthew had never used it, until now. Rob left the room with weak legs. He leaned against the hallway wall and cried again. But these tears were different. They weren't of pain, they were of gratitude, of love, of connection. 2 days later, Rob made a decision. He called Valerie, his ex-wife, Matthew's mother. They had spoken little in the last year, only the necessary things. "How is he?" "Fine, take care, goodbye." But this time was different. "Valerie, I need you to come here." "What happened?" Her voice sounded alarmed. "Is Matthew okay?" "He's more than okay. Please. You have to see this." Valerie arrived 3 days later. Rob picked her up at the airport. The drive back to the house was tense. She kept asking questions. He just kept saying, "Just wait." "You have to see it for yourself." When they entered the house, Matthew was in the living room with Carol, playing with puzzles. Valerie stopped in the doorway. She looked at her son, 7 years old, dark hair, big eyes. She hadn't seen him in a year. Matthew looked up, saw his mother. He froze. Valerie didn't move. She was afraid that Matthew would scream, afraid that he would hit himself, afraid that he wouldn't recognize her. But then Matthew stood up, walked towards her, stopped a foot away, and raised his hands. "Mom." Valerie didn't understand. She looked at Rob. "What is he doing?" "Sign language." Rob smiled. "He's saying Mom." Valerie covered her mouth with her hands. Instant tears. Rob walked over to her. He whispered, "Tell him you missed him. I don't know how. I'll show you." Rob took Valerie's hands, showed her the sign. "I missed you." Hands in a fist, crossed over the chest. Then pointing to Matthew, Valerie tried. Her hands were shaking so much that she could barely form the signs. But she did it. "I missed you, Matthew." Matthew looked at his mother's hands, processed the signs, then walked towards her. And for the first time in years, he let himself be hugged. Valerie squeezed him against her chest, sobbing. Matthew didn't pull away. He stayed there, tolerating the contact, maybe even enjoying it. Carol watched from the corner of the room, smiling silently. Rob looked at her. He made a sign that he had practiced. "Thank you," Carol replied. "You're welcome." That night, after Matthew was asleep, Robert, Valerie, and Carol sat in the living room. Valerie couldn't stop crying. "I can't believe it's real," she sobbed. "I can't believe he actually talked to me." Carol explained everything. "The months of work," she said softly. "The signs we learned, the notebook with his progress, the little victories." Valerie listened, astonished, surprised, and maybe just a little ashamed. "Why didn't anyone tell us this was possible?" Valerie asked, her voice cracking. "We went to so many doctors, so many specialists." "Because they didn't try," Rob said, his voice not angry, just sad. "They didn't see Matthew as a trapped little boy trying to get out. They saw him as a diagnosis, as a case, as a statistic." "But Carol saw him differently," Valerie said, her voice full of gratitude. Carol nodded. "I saw him as my nephew, and this time I wasn't going to be late." Valerie wiped away her tears. "I want to learn. Please, teach me." And so, Carol began to teach Valerie too, every day, for the next 2 weeks. Valerie was there, learning, practicing, communicating with her son in ways she never thought possible. If you don't feel a chill right now, if you don't feel something moving in your chest, then you're not understanding what just happened. A family broken, shattered by the impossibility of communication, has just found a way to reconnect. Not because someone sold them an expensive solution, but because someone believed enough to try. 3 weeks later, something extraordinary happened. Robert was in his office, meeting with Japanese investors, expansion into Asia, million-dollar contracts. His assistant entered discreetly and handed him a note. Emergency at home, Matthew. Robert's heart stopped. "Excuse me," he said urgently. "I have to go." He sped down the highway, pushing his Tesla to 75 miles per hour. He called Carol. No answer. He called the house. Nothing. He dialed 911, ready to call an ambulance. But then he received a text from Carol. "Everything's fine, Mr. Miller. Sorry for the scare. Just come quickly. You have to see this." Robert arrived in 15 minutes. He rushed inside. The house was silent. There were no screams, no chaos, just Carol in the living room, smiling with tears in her eyes. "Where's Matthew?" Robert asked. Still breathing heavily, Carol pointed upstairs. "In his room. He's okay. More than okay." "What happened?" Carol didn't answer. She just said, "Go up, slowly. Don't make any noise." Robert walked upstairs, his heart still racing. He walked toward Matthew's room. The door was ajar. He peeked inside. What he saw made him freeze. Matthew was sitting on the floor. In front of him, his drawing pad. But he wasn't drawing circles like always. He was drawing something different. Hands. Dozens of hands, in different positions, making signs. Robert recognized some. Water. Food. Mom. Dad. But there were others, new ones, that he didn't know. And Matthew wasn't just drawing. He was talking. Not with his voice, but he was talking. As he drew each hand, he made the corresponding sign in the air, as if he were practicing, as if he were teaching himself. Robert entered the room. Matthew looked up. He wasn't scared. He just looked at him. Then he pointed to his drawing. He made a sign that Robert didn't know. "I don't understand, Matthew. What does that mean?" Matthew frowned, frustrated. He picked up the notebook and flipped back to an earlier page. There, in childish handwriting, clumsy but legible, he had written one word, "Happy." Below it, a drawing of the sign. Both hands open, moving in a circular motion over the chest. Matthew made the sign again. Then he pointed to Robert, then to himself. Robert understood. "You're happy?" he asked, making the sign. "I'm happy too, Matthew." Matthew smiled. A big, real smile. Then he went back to his drawings. Robert walked downstairs as if in a trance. Carol was waiting. They sat in the living room. "He's learning on his own," Robert said, awestruck. "He's looking for new signs. He's teaching himself." Carol nodded. "This morning, he asked me a question he's never asked before." "What did he ask?" "He asked me how to sign friend." Carol wiped away a tear. "Matthew has never had a friend, Mr. Miller. But now that he can communicate, he wants to know how to say that word. Because he's starting to imagine that it's possible." Robert felt something breaking and healing at the same time in his chest. His son, who had lived 7 years in a solitary world, isolated not by choice, but by impossibility, was now imagining connection, friendship, belonging. "Did you teach him the sign?" "Yes." Carol made the gesture, 2 hands interlocked, pinkies crossed. "We practiced it for an hour. Then he asked me something else." "What?" "How to sign school." Robert stared at Carol. School? Matthew had never been to school. The doctor said it wasn't recommended. Too much stimulation, too much chaos. Matthew needed a controlled environment, therapies at home, special education one-on-one. But now... "Do you think he's ready?" Robert asked, his voice full of hope and fear. Carol thought carefully. "I think he was always ready, Mr. Miller. He just needed a way to tell the world. I'm here. I can learn. Give me a chance." That night, Robert researched schools for children with autism, special education programs, institutions that used sign language as an augmentative communication tool. He found one, the Hope Educational Center, located in Pasadena. Inclusive methodology, teachers trained in ASL, small classes, respect for each child's pace. He called the next day, explained the situation, and was given an appointment for an evaluation. 2 weeks later, Robert, Valerie, Carol, and Matthew went to the center. It was a small building, painted in bright colors, a garden with adapted play equipment, a ramp for wheelchairs, visual signage on all the walls. The director, a woman in her 50s named Patricia, greeted them. She wore a pin on her lapel with the alphabet in sign language. "Welcome." Patricia signed as she spoke. Then she looked at Matthew. "Hello, Matthew. I'm Patricia." Matthew looked at her. He didn't respond. Robert felt a wave of anxiety. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe Matthew wasn't ready. But then Patricia did something that the previous specialist had never done. She crouched down. She got down to Matthew's level, and she waited, without pressuring him, without forcing contact. After a minute, Matthew raised his hand and made a sign. "Hello," Patricia smiled. Then she made another sign. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Matthew processed the question. Then he nodded his head, but he didn't sign. Patricia took something out of her pocket, a small plastic figurine, a Tyrannosaurus Rex. She showed it to Matthew. "This is Rex. He lives here at the school. He likes children who know how to talk with their hands. Do you think he'd like you?" Matthew looked at the dinosaur. Then he looked at Patricia. He reached out his hand, timidly, uncertainly. Patricia handed him the toy figurine. Matthew took it. He examined it. He moved the dinosaur's legs. Then he looked at Patricia and signed, "Thank you." Patricia looked at Robert and Valerie. Their son was ready. They could start next week. Some viewers will pause this video right here, because this is too much, because it hurts to realize how many children like Matthew are out there, trapped, waiting for someone to give them a tool to break free. How many could be communicating if someone would just try? The first day of school was difficult. Matthew cried when Robert and Valerie left, but he didn't scream. He didn't hit himself. He just cried. And when Carol, who was now working as Matthew's personal aide with a real salary, signed, "It's okay, they'll be back," Matthew calmed down. He nodded and went into the classroom. When they picked him up 3 hours later, Matthew came running out. Well, not running, walking fast, towards Robert. He showed him a drawing he had made. 2 children playing. Underneath, in crooked letters, "Me and my friend." "You made a friend?" Robert asked, signing as he spoke. Matthew nodded excitedly. He made a series of quick signs. Robert didn't understand all of them, but he got the gist. "Boy, name is Leo, also uses sign language, played with blocks." Robert looked at Carol. She was crying. Valerie too, but they were tears of happiness. That night, Robert couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, from awe. His son had made a friend. His son had gone to school. His son was living a life that, 6 months ago, had seemed impossible. And all because a woman, who used to barely scrape by each week, had decided that impossible was just a word people used when they didn't want to try. But there was something else that Robert needed to do, something he'd been putting off, something that filled him with both shame and gratitude. One evening, after Matthew had fallen asleep, Robert asked Carol to stay. "I need to talk to you." They sat in the living room. Robert had prepared an envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "What's this?" Carol asked. "Open it." Carol opened the envelope. Inside was a check, $100,000, and a paper, a contract. "Robert, this is too little," Robert interrupted. "It's too little for what you did, but it's what I can give you now. The contract is for a formal position, specialized caregiver, Matthew's aide, $5,000 a month, health insurance, end-of-year bonus, paid vacation. And this," Robert pointed to the check, "is payment for the 4 months you worked teaching my son, without anyone asking you to, without expecting anything in return." Carol looked at the check. Then she put it back on the table. "Mr. Miller, please." Robert felt tears burning his eyes. "Please accept it. I can't turn back time. I can't give you back the years I lost. I can't give your nephew, David, the opportunity he didn't have. But I can do this. I can acknowledge what you did. I can pay you what you deserve. I can treat you not as an employee, but as what you really are. The person who gave my son his voice. Carol was silent. Then she picked up the check. But she also took Robert's hand. I didn't do it for money. Mr. Miller, you know that, right? I know. That's why I need to give it to you. Because what wasn't done for money, that's what's worth the most. Carol accepted the check and the contract, but with one condition. I want to use part of this money for something. Anything. I want to create a program to teach sign language to other parents with children like Matthew for free, so that no family has to wait as long as you did, so that no child is trapped when the key to getting out is so simple. Robert felt something expanding in his chest. I won't just do that. Carol, I'm going to fund that entire program. Global Tech is going to sponsor it. We're going to hire teachers. We're going to create tutorial videos. We're going to distribute them for free on the internet to any family that needs it, in memory of David and in honor of Matthew. Carol covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. I can't believe that. This is just the beginning, Robert said. Your nephew didn't have time, but we're going to make sure that his story wasn't in vain. We're going to give time to thousands of children who are waiting. And it was then that Robert truly understood. He hadn't come home early that day by chance. He hadn't found Carol teaching Matthew sign language by accident. It had all been necessary, painful, but necessary, because sometimes life breaks you, smashes you into pieces, snatches away your communication with the person you love most, and just when you think there's no way out, just when you're about to give up, someone appears. Someone who shouldn't matter according to the world's rules, someone that society ignores, someone who wears a cleaning uniform and rides the bus for 2 hours, and that person shows you that miracles don't come from heaven, they come from human hands, willing to try the impossible. 6 months after that day, Robert was on a stage, a TEDx Los Angeles conference. Topic, the communication that saved my family. In front of him, 400 people, cameras, lights, expectation. Robert began his talk in the most honest way possible. My name is Robert Miller. I'm the CEO of a global tech, and for 7 years, I couldn't talk to my own son. He told the whole story. Matthew's diagnosis, the regression, the years of silence, the failed therapies, the broken marriage, the hopelessness. And then he told about Carol. A home aide, Robert said, who used to barely scrape by each week, did what a team of specialists with doctorates couldn't do. Why? Not because she was smarter, not because she had more resources, but because she saw my son, not as a diagnosis, but as a child with something to say. Robert paused. He looked out into the audience, and there, in the third row, was Carol, with her son, Justin, with Valerie, and with Matthew. Matthew was sitting still, something that a year ago would have been impossible. He was looking at his father, attentive, present. Robert raised his hands and signed as he spoke. Today, I want to introduce you to someone, Carol Summers, the woman who gave my son his voice. The woman who taught me that real communication isn't about words. It's about being willing to learn the other person's language, even if it's difficult, even if it takes time, even if the world tells you it's impossible. The audience stood up. Applause. Carol stood up, embarrassed by the attention, but Matthew stood up too. He took Carol's hand, and together they walked up onto the stage. Robert knelt down in front of his son. Matthew, do you want to say something to the people? Matthew looked at the audience, hundreds of faces, bright lights, noise. He signed slowly, but clearly, I have a voice. Now I have friends. A year ago, Rob would have collapsed. He would have screamed, he would have run away, but now he raised his hands and made a sign, clear, firm, intentional. Thank you. He didn't say it with his voice, but everyone understood. The applause was deafening. After the conference, dozens of people approached him. Parents of children with autism, teachers, therapists, all with the same question: how can I learn sign language for my child? Rob handed them a card with a QR code. Scanning it opened a web platform. Silent Voice Project. Free sign language courses for families of children with autism, created by Carol Summers and funded by Global Tech. In the first 6 months, 10,000 families registered. From the US, from Canada, from the UK, from Australia, all learning, all trying, all giving their children a voice. And in every video tutorial, at the beginning, there was a dedication, in memory of Diego, in honor of Matthew, for all the children who deserve to be heard. If you've made it this far and felt nothing, then you have no heart. But if you felt something, if there's a part of you that's thinking about all the times you judged someone for their job, for their appearance, for their bank account, then you already know what you have to do. 18 months after the day Rob discovered Carol teaching Matthew sign language, everyone's life had changed in ways they never could have imagined. Matthew was now 8.5 years old. He was still autistic. Autism doesn't disappear. It doesn't get cured. But he was no longer trapped. His sign language vocabulary had grown to 340 signs. He could form complex sentences, ask questions, express emotions, say when he was scared, when he was happy, when he needed a hug. He attended school 5 days a week. He had 3 friends: Leo, his first friend; Sophia, a little girl with Down syndrome who also used sign language; and Miguel, a hearing boy who learned sign language just so he could talk to Matthew. The meltdowns had decreased by 80%. They hadn't disappeared. There were still difficult days. Days when the world was too loud, too bright, too much. But now, when Matthew got frustrated, he could say it. He could make the sign for help. He could communicate, "I need a break, I need silence, I need you to hug me," but gently. And the family understood, because now they spoke the same language. Rob had reduced his work hours. He no longer worked 16 hours a day. He worked 8, sometimes less, because he had learned something that took him 7 years to discover. An empire without human connection is worth nothing. Global Tech continued to grow, but Rob was no longer just the CEO obsessed with numbers. He was the CEO who came home at 6 p.m., who had dinner with his son, who read with him before bed, using signs, connected. Valerie had moved back to Los Angeles. She didn't come back with Rob as a couple. That chapter had closed, but she came back as a mother, as a co-parent, as part of the team that Matthew needed. She lived in an apartment 20 minutes from the house. She saw Matthew 4 days a week. She picked him up from school, took him to the park, practiced signs with him, and for the first time in years, Valerie felt like a mother, not just an exhausted caregiver, but a mother who knew her son, who understood his fears, his joys, his dreams. One Sunday, Valerie took Matthew to a dinosaur museum. Matthew was fascinated. He ran from display case to display case, pointing, asking questions in sign. "Mom, look, that's a triceratops. Mom, how old is it? Mom, can I have a toy one?" An older woman approached Valerie. "Excuse me, but what language is your son speaking?" Valerie smiled. "American Sign Language." The woman looked at Matthew curiously. "Is he deaf?" "No, he's autistic, nonverbal. Sign language is his way of talking." The woman nodded. Then she said something that made Valerie want to cry. "He's so lucky to have a mother who learned his language." Lucky? No. The lucky one was someone else. Someone who believed in him before we did. Carol was still a fundamental part of Matthew's life, but her role had evolved. She was no longer a housekeeper. She was the director of the Silent Voice Project. She coordinated a team of 12 people, sign language instructors, educators, educational content designers, all working to create free resources for families. The project had grown beyond anyone's expectations. More than 50,000 families registered in 2 years. Video tutorials in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Weekly webinars. Support groups on social media. A mobile app with an interactive sign dictionary, specifically designed for children with autism. And it all started because Carol refused to accept that a 7-year-old boy had to live in silence forever. Her son Javier, now 16, was proud of his mother. He had learned sign language too. Sometimes he went with Carol to give workshops. He helped other families. And when his friends at school asked him what his mom did, Javier said proudly, "My mum gives a voice to children the world had forgotten." But the story hadn't ended there. One day, Carol received an email. It was from a woman in Argentina. "My name is Patricia. My son is 6 years old, severe nonverbal autism. The doctor said he would never communicate, but I saw your video and I want to try. Can you help me?" Carol responded personally. "Of course, here's a guide to get started. First sign, hello. Practice it for a week. Don't expect immediate results. Just practice, patiently with love, and write me to tell me how it goes." 3 months later, Patricia sent her a video. Her son making the sign for water, his first intentional communication in 6 years of life. Patricia's message said, "I cried for 2 hours. My son spoke to me for the first time. He told me what he needed. Thank you for not giving up on us." Stories like that arrived every week. Families in Mexico, Colombia, Spain, the United States, Brazil, all learning, all trying, all discovering that their children did have something to say. They just needed a different language. One afternoon, Rob took Matthew to the park. It was a sunny Saturday. Matthew played on the swings. Rob sat on a bench watching him. A man sat next to him. He was also watching a child about 5 years old, who was rocking back and forth without interacting with the other children. The man sighed. "Autism, diagnosed 2 months ago. Doesn't speak, doesn't look at us. The doctors say he probably never will." Rob looked at the man. He saw his own desperation from years ago, reflected in that face. "I thought the same thing 2 years ago." The man looked at him confused. Rob pointed to Matthew, who was now on the slide. "That's my son. Matthew, 8 years old, severely autistic, nonverbal." The man frowned. "But your son is playing. My son doesn't do that. 2 years ago, my son didn't do that either." Rob pulled out his phone. He showed the man the QR code for Project Voice Silent. "Scan this, watch the videos, learn sign language. I can't guarantee your son will speak with his voice, but I guarantee that if you give him a tool to communicate, he will surprise you." The man scanned the code. He looked at the screen. "Sign language? The doctors never mentioned that." "Mine didn't either." Rob smiled sadly. "It was a cleaning lady who taught me. Someone who earned $800 a week. Someone who saw what a team of specialists couldn't see. That my son just needed a different language." The man looked at his son, then he looked at his phone screen, then he asked, "Does it really work?" Rob called Matthew. "Matthew, come here, please." Matthew came down from the slide. He walked towards his father. Rob signed to him. "Matthew, this gentleman has a son like you. Can you say hello?" Matthew looked at the man. Then he made the sign for hello. Open hand, waving motion. Simple, clear, intentional. The man covered his mouth. His eyes filled with tears. "Your son understands you. He responded to you. He obeyed you." Rob nodded. 2 years ago, that was impossible. Today it's normal, because someone didn't accept the word impossible as the final answer. That night, Rob received a message from that man. "I've already watched 3 videos. My wife and I are practicing the sign for hello. Our son watched us for 5 seconds. He's never looked at us that long." "This is a start, right?" Rob replied. "Yes, it's a start, and beginnings are miracles disguised as little things. This story shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be necessary. Because every non-verbal autistic child should have access to sign language from the moment of diagnosis. It should be the first thing doctors suggest, not the last thing a cleaning lady desperately tries. But this story does exist, and it exists for a reason. To remind you of something the world wants you to forget, that the most important people in your life aren't always the ones with titles. They're not the ones who earn the most. They're not the ones who appear on magazine covers. Sometimes, the most important people are the ones who arrive an hour early, the ones who study on the bus home, the ones who see a child trapped in silence and say, "I'm not going to let him stay like that. It doesn't matter if nobody pays me extra. It doesn't matter if nobody asks me to. I'm going to try." Carol Summers still works every day, now in an office, not cleaning floors but changing lives. But she still arrives early. She still stays late. She still answers every email personally. Because for Carol, this was never about recognition. It was always about Diego, her nephew, the child who didn't have time, and about Matthew, the child who did have it, and about the thousands of children who are waiting for someone to believe enough to try. The other day, Carol was giving an in-person workshop for parents. 30 families, children with autism between 3 and 10 years old, most non-verbal. Carol taught them the first sign, hello, open hand, waving motion. All the parents practiced, clumsy, insecure, with hope in their eyes. One mother raised her hand. How long will it take before my son responds? Carol smiled. I don't know. It took Matthew 47 attempts before he made his first sign. Other children take less, some take more. But I can tell you this, every attempt counts. Every sign you practice, even if your child doesn't respond, is being processed. It's being saved. And one day when you least expect it, your child will raise their hands and speak to you in their way, in their time. But they will speak to you. 6 months later, that same mother sent Carol a video. Her son Santiago making the sign for Mom, his first communication in 5 years. The message read, I didn't give up. I practiced for 93 days, and today my son called me Mom. Thank you for teaching me not to give up. Carol saved that video, as she saves all the videos sent to her, in a folder on her computer titled Why I Do It. Today, Matthew is 9 years old. He goes to school, he has friends, he reads, he writes, he draws, he dreams of being a paleontologist. He wants to study dinosaurs when he grows up. He still doesn't speak with his voice. Maybe he never will. But he has a voice made of hands, of signs, of human connection that transcends words. Every night before going to sleep, Rob goes into Matthew's room. He sits on the edge of the bed, and they have a conversation, silent to the outside world, but full of meaning for them. How was your day, Matthew? Good, Dad. We played soccer. I was the goalie. Did you like it? Yes. I blocked 3 goals. My friends said I'm good. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too, Dad. And then Matthew makes a sign. The sign that Carol taught him 2 years ago. The sign that changed everything. I love you, Dad. Rob signs back. I love you, son. He turns off the light, closes the door, and walks down the hallway with tears in his eyes, not of sadness, of gratitude, because his son has a voice, because his family is connected, because someone refused to accept silence as the final destiny. That person was Carol, a woman the world would have ignored, that society classifies as a domestic worker who earns less in a month than Rob spent on a business dinner. But Carol gave Matthew something that no $1 million could buy. She gave him hope. She gave him a language. She gave him a way to tell the world, I'm here, I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have a voice. And if that's not the definition of a miracle, then I don't know what is. You have 2 options now. You can close this and forget it. Continue with your life. Continue judging people by their titles, their bank accounts, their appearances, or you can remember. Remember that Carol exists. that Matthew exists. That thousands of children are waiting for someone to believe enough to try. You can ask, is there a Carol in my life that I've ignored? Is there a Matthew waiting for me to learn his language? Because the truth is this: miracles don't fall from the sky. Miracles are born from human hands that refuse to give up, from hearts that see possibility where others saw impossibility, from ordinary people who do extraordinary things simply because someone needed someone to believe. Carol Summers gave a voice to a child the world said would never speak, not with a divine miracle, but with patience, with YouTube videos, with cardboard flashcards that cost $2, with a love that can't be bought or sold. It can only be given. And if that doesn't make you reconsider who the most important people in your life are, then you're not paying attention. This story ends where it began, with Matthew waiting. But now, he doesn't wait in silence. Now, when Carol arrives, Matthew runs toward her. He raises his hands, and he says, in his own way, in his own language, "Hi, Carol, I missed you." And Carol responds, "I missed you too, Matthew." And in that simple exchange, in those hands moving with meaning, is the proof that the impossible only exists until someone decides to try. The next time you see someone that society ignores, someone wearing a uniform, someone who earns less, someone who doesn't have degrees on the wall, ask yourself, what miracle might this person be holding in their hands? What impossibility might they be challenging and in silence? Because Carol wasn't special when she walked into that house. She was a housekeeper looking for a job, but she became the person who changed the life of a child, of a family, of thousands of families, simply because she saw what others didn't see, because she tried what others didn't try, because she believed when others had already stopped believing. And that's what makes an ordinary life extraordinary. Not fame, not money, not recognition, but the decision not to give up on someone that everyone else has already abandoned. Matthew has a voice today. Carol gave him that voice, and Rob learned the most important lesson of his life, that you can build empires, earn millions, appear on magazine covers, but if you can't talk to your son, if you don't know his heart, if you don't understand his language, then you've failed at the only thing that really matters: connecting. Really, deeply, humanly. And sometimes, just sometimes, you need someone with calloused hands from cleaning floors to teach you how to do it. Thank you, Carol, for Matthew, for all the children who deserve to be heard, for reminding us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear blue uniforms. Sometimes they travel 2 hours on a bus. Sometimes they study from YouTube videos, and sometimes they change the world, one sign at a time. This story has ended, but your story is just beginning. What are you going to do with what you've just learned? Are you going to be the Rob who ignored it for 7 years? Or are you going to be the Carol who refused to accept the impossible? The choice was always yours. It always will be.